Notice to all those in attendance, a recording and broadcast is being made at the direction of the board, and the recording or broadcast may capture images or sounds of those attending the meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. We're going to open the meeting with a moment of silence. This past week, our nation has suffered unimaginable loss with 3 mass shootings, one in Gilroy, California, where 3 people were killed, in El Paso, Texas, where 22 people were killed, and in Dayton, Ohio, where 9 people were killed. We mourn with the families and the communities that are suffering so much. We've lowered our flags around the district at half-staff to honor these victims, and now I ask you to join me in a moment of silence for so many lives lost. Thank you. Thank you. We'll continue on with our agenda. That brings us to item 3.2, report out of closed session. Ms. Couvret.
Closed session began at 4:15. The Board of Education took the following action in closed session. For 2.1-A-1 in the matter of pending existing litigation, case number 7022019, on a motion by Zane and a second by O'Connor Radcliffe, the board voted unanimously to approve the final settlement. And Beatty was absent on that. For 2.1-A-2 in the matter of pending existing litigation, case number 20190306612, on a motion by Zane and a second by O'Connor Radcliffe, the board voted to approve the final settlement. The vote on the board was unanimous by the attendees. For 2.1-A-3 in the matter of pending existing litigation, case number 20190501143, on a motion by O'Connor Radcliffe and a second by Zane, the board voted to approve the final settlement. The vote again was unanimous for those attended. 2.3-A in the matter of pupil personnel and student expulsion, disciplinary matters, and other confidential student matters, appeal of administrative hearings panel decision, on a motion by Zane and a second by O'Connor Radcliffe, the board voted to approve and adopt the findings of fact and recommendation of the administrative hearings panel decision to administratively place the student based on the board's review of the findings of fact and recommendations and consideration of arguments regarding the appeal heard in closed session. The vote of the board was unanimous, with the ayes being Patel, O'Connor, Radcliffe, Couvret, and Zane, with Beatty absent. Matter 2.4-A, there was no reportable action. 2.4-B, no reportable action. 2.6-A in the matter of public employee employment, Principal Elementary School, on a motion by Michelle O'Connor Radcliffe and a second by Ginger Couvret, the board voted to take action in closed session to appoint Michelle Saguawa Ward as principal of Tierra Bonita Elementary School, and the vote was unanimous, with Beatty being absent. No other reportable action was taken during closed session. Closed session adjourned at 6:03 and will reconvene after open session to discuss 2.4-A.
Thank you very much, Ms. Couvret. I believe our new principal, Ms. Ward, is here in the audience. Would you like to stand up and please come forward? Welcome to the district. You can have your picture taken. You could say a few words to introduce yourself.
Oh, great. Hi, I'm Michelle Ward. I'm so excited to join the Poway team and the staff and the families at Tierra Bonita. And Board of Education members, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you and welcome. We're excited.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Yay!
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 3.3, board members in attendance. We have all board members in attendance except for board member Kimberly Beatty. And welcome, Ms. Mariana Atkins. Would you like to go on to agenda item 3.4?
Welcome to the monthly meeting of the Board of Education. If you would like to address the board on any agenda item, please complete a speaker slip. All requests to speak must be submitted to the clerk of the board before the agenda item comes up. If you are requesting an agenda item be pulled for public discussion from section 5.0, consent calendar, a speaker slip must be submitted to the clerk now, as approval of the consent calendar is one of the first items up for approval. Item 4.2 is placed on our agenda to enable members of our community to bring items that are not placed anywhere else on the agenda to the board's attention. Speaking time is limited to 3 minutes per speaker with a maximum of 15 minutes per topic unless waived by the board president. There will be a 30-second yellow warning light when time is running out. Speakers may only speak on one topic under item 4.2 and may not defer their speaking time to another individual. If there are concerns regarding specific individuals, it is preferred that the speaker refrain from naming them publicly to respect their privacy. The board will accept and review any written materials that would provide more specific information. The Brown Act does not permit board action or extended discussion of any item not on the agenda, but your concerns will be referred to staff. With that said, welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Very well done. So for you, agenda item 3.5, this is our approval of agenda sequence. This is your first opportunity to give your preferential vote.
Motion to approve.
Oh, sorry.
Second.
On a motion by O'Connor Ratcliffe, second by Zane. Mariana, how do you vote? Aye? Aye. All those in favor from the board? Aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Five. Okay. We're on 4.0, oral presentations. 4.1, student board representatives, and there are none today. 4.2, public comments. Ms. Coubret?
Mike and Gina Jacobs.
Hi there. My name's Gina Jacobs. My son goes to Morning Creek Elementary. I wanted to bring to your attention issues we're having with the interdistrict transfer process. My oldest son has been at Morning Creek for 3 years now, and the district is now saying that my kindergartner cannot go to that school, and they are splitting up the siblings and suggesting that I would have to pull my son from the school he's been at since kindergarten in order to accomplish some business process that I don't understand with the balancing of schools. And so I would just like to make sure that the board's aware that this is happening, and we're not the only family in particular at Morning Creek that this is happening to. I know there's several other families that are being split up, and I am really distressed about it. For myself and for my children who are going to be uprooted. We have ESS already situated at our school, and we're both working parents and want to make sure that that is not something that we are not going to be able to, it's going to completely uproot our lives if we have to change schools and change locations and do all of that. So I wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that being an issue and hope that there might be some way that we could make this right so that our children are not uprooted from the school that they call home. So thank you.
Do we have any others? That brings us to item 4.3. Let me get to that page. Talia's Tolerance Tour presentation. And for staff support, Dr. Phelps.
At this time, we want to welcome Poway High School senior Talia Schroeder and her family. Talia is here to present her Tolerance Tour. Talia has been sharing her grandfather's Holocaust survival story with thousands of middle and high school students across Poway Unified School District and in San Diego County as well, to build tolerance, inclusion, and understanding among young people. She was recently awarded a leadership award from the Jewish Community Foundation for Excellence in Community Service and Leadership. Talia, thank you for coming and sharing your presentation with us.
Thank you. Do I need to lower this? Yeah. Okay. So
Hi, my name is Talia Schauder. I'm 17 years old, and I'm a senior at Poway High School. I play the flute, I love to take pictures, and spend time with my friends and family. Over the past 15 months, I've gone largely to middle and high schools to share my grandfather's Holocaust survival story. And to date, I have reached about 4,500 people. I've spoken within San Diego County and even internationally. I especially want to thank Mr. Nash, my principal, for all of his support for my presentations. I tailor each presentation to my audience, including programs that schools are using, such as the No Place for Hate program, and I explain current events displaying anti-Semitism. I'm going to present to you what I normally present to my middle and high school audiences. I understand the social pressures that you experience. Today I just ask that you put yourself in someone else's shoes. Raise your hand if you've ever heard a joke about the Holocaust or other sensitive topics being made. I've had this experience at my own school, hearing my peers joke about the horrors of the Holocaust. Believe me when I say it is not funny. It is not funny to have a joke made against your culture and have to walk away crying or pretend like it doesn't hurt. Enough is enough. Let's make change together. You may have also seen headlines and posts about the anti-Semitic party that occurred this past March. Students of schools in the Orange County and Newport area gathered and created a swastika out of red Solo cups. This action of hate was self-advertised by partygoers through social media outlets such as Snapchat. A Los Angeles rabbi commented that this is an insult to the 6 million Jews who died in the Holocaust. It's also an insult to the many thousands of families in Southern California whose loved ones in the Greatest Generation fought, bled, and died to defeat the Nazis and defeat the swastika. This is a representation of how to this day anti-Semitic acts are still occurring. It is important to become educated so that we can overcome history and make sure that it is not repeated. Many people posted to their Instagrams acknowledging this horrific action that occurred, but spread positivity towards a better tomorrow. April 27th. In our very home of Poway, the Chabad synagogue faced a shooting. It was a Saturday morning Shabbat service, as well as being the last day of Passover. Members of the synagogue were simply exhibiting their rights as a citizen of the United States of freedom of religion when they were faced with a killer, 19 years of age, a graduate of Mount Carmel High School, who interrupted their time of prayer and opened fire. The rabbi tried to calm the shooter, and he himself was shot in the hand. There were 4 victims, one young girl who attends Chabad of Scripps for day school, her uncle who was visiting from Israel, Rabbi Goldstein, and Lori Kay, who was left in critical condition to die later that day. This hits so close to home. It is important to become educated so that we can overcome history and make sure that hate-motivated crimes are not repeated. I want to work with you to ensure the safety and acceptance of our peers, no matter one's religion, race, sexual orientation, or differences as a whole. You may have heard the motto related to Holocaust remembrance, never forget. Aside from just knowing this motto, what action are we taking to ensure that society as a whole never forgets? I believe that in order to make change for the future, we have to speak out for what is right. This brings me to my next point. Soon there aren't going to be any Holocaust survivors left. Who is going to be able to speak out for them and their memory? Think about this. There are an estimated 100,000 Holocaust survivors of camps, ghettos, and hiding under Nazi occupation left worldwide today, but they are mostly in their 80s and 90s, meaning they do not have that long left to live. Our generation must continue educating and spreading awareness. A survey was completed this past year, and it was found that an estimated 11% of U.S. adults and 22% of millennials said they either hadn't heard of or were not sure whether they had heard of the Holocaust. And 31% of adults and 41% of millennials believe incorrectly that 2 million Jews or fewer were killed during the Holocaust. To think that people are living their lives having no idea of what happened from 1938 to 1945 to the 6 million Jews and 5 million other minorities. Today I want to share with you a very personal story. My grandfather, Paul Schauder, was one of the incredible survivors of the Holocaust. I have listened firsthand to his traumatic experiences living in Nazi Germany and living through the Holocaust. Today I would like to join you to create a safer, more accepting community. The Holocaust took place from 1938 to 1945. The Holocaust was the mass killing of Jews and other minorities in Europe, such as Slavs, Russians, Spaniards, Polish people, Roma, Jehovah's Witnesses, Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, people who identified as part of the LGBTQ community, as well as those who were physically or mentally disabled, and others who did not fit the Nazi ideal. There are over 6 million Jewish victims who were slaughtered throughout the Holocaust, and up to 5 million victims who were part of the other groups that I listed. Let's back up to before the war had started in Germany. My grandpa Paul was the youngest of 3 sons. His dad's name was Marcus, and his mom was Fanny. His older brothers were named Jacob and Herman. Paul's family was very involved in Jewish life, and they were active participants in their local synagogue, Rashi Synagogue. Paul began attending school at the age of 6, and he attended a Jewish private school, as Jews were not permitted to attend public school. Before the war began, Jews were already being segregated from the others. They had fewer rights in comparison to the other Germans, even though they contributed greatly to the country. Many Jews were business owners. My grandfather's family owned a department store named Kaufhaus Schauder, where they sold furniture and other expensive goods. November 10th, 1938 was a date that changed everything for the Jews in Germany and throughout Europe. This date will never be forgotten by any Jew that survived the Holocaust. This was when Kristallnacht occurred. Kristallnacht, meaning Crystal Night and known as Night of Broken Glass, refers to the smashing and destruction of Jewish homes, businesses, synagogues, and cemeteries by Nazi soldiers and supporters of Hitler. Kristallnacht was the turning point for anti-Semitism to rapidly worsen across Europe. Anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jews just for the fact that they are Jewish. Hitler and his Nazi officials were masters at brainwashing the youth of Germany into believing the Nazi ideals, which were driven by hate. For my grandpa Paul's family specifically, their department store was destroyed during Kristallnacht, leaving them no choice but to flee or face being arrested. The night that Kristallnacht occurred, Paul's father Marcus was arrested by the Gestapo, the Nazi police. My grandpa remembers this day vividly. He was the youngest and least suspicious of his family, so his mother sent him with bread to bring to his father in the jail cell. He was mocked and laughed at by the Gestapo when he asked to see his father. Finally, after much humiliation, Paul was allowed to see him. Paul spent his time in the jail cell crying and being comforted by his dad. Paul was unaware this would be the last time he would ever see his father. The image of his helpless father, sitting alone on a stool in a stark prison cell, would be forever ingrained in Paul's memory. Through this experience, Paul was forced to become a man at just 7 years old. Later, Paul and his family would learn of his father, Marcus's death in the concentration camp of Buchenwald. A concentration camp is where Jews, along with the other minority groups, were sent to die. Most of the people would meet their death there. They were starved and worked to death, sent on death marches, tortured, experimented on, and killed in gas chambers. The living quarters, as you can see, were insane. Many people shared one wooden frame of a bed, and they were sparsely clothed. Every person in the concentration camp was assigned a number that was tattooed onto their arm. This is how each person was known, more like an animal than an actual human. Upon entering the concentration camps, the Nazis took the belongings of each person, shaved their heads, among other things. Each set of belongings, such as these rings, shoes, and suitcases, representing a person's life unlived. Outside of the camps, throughout towns in Europe, all Jews were required to wear a yellow Jewish star at all times. They had to sew it into their clothes, and if caught without it, they could be arrested or sent to a concentration camp. For the next 3 months, my grandfather Paul remained in the city of Worms, Germany, with his mother and 2 brothers. His mother arranged to rent a small apartment next to a cemetery in Worms, Germany. After 3 months, his family received notice that they would have to leave the city because as Jews, they did not have the proper permits to be living in Worms. After leaving Worms, my grandpa's mother Fanny arranged for he and his brothers to stay in a Jewish orphanage in Frankfurt while she was forced to go to Berlin to work in a clinic. The boys were able to practice Judaism and celebrate the important holidays along with weekly Shabbat inside the orphanage. Even though inside the orphanage the children were able to practice Judaism, they were still well aware of the danger lurking outside. They remained in this orphanage for about 3 years until their mother arranged for them to be moved to a different Jewish orphanage in Berlin. Their mother was able to visit a few times, and every time she made sure to remind her sons that if they were ever faced with a threat, they had to run. This picture was taken during one of her visits and is the last picture ever taken with all three sons alive. Late in August of 1943, danger arrived. The Gestapo had completely surrounded the orphanage, ready to transport all the children to different concentration camps where most would meet their death. Paul and his brothers came together in order to decide their plan. Both Paul and his eldest brother, Jacob, knew they had no choice except to run. However, Herman, a rule follower, insisted on following German law, forcing Paul and Jacob to leave him behind. Herman would later die in the concentration camp of Auschwitz. This chilling photo is of a Nazi document sealing young Herman's fate. Paul and Jacob were able to escape the orphanage through the back staircase, and through all the chaos, they went unnoticed. They ran through the dark for 30 minutes to find their mother at the clinic. Somehow they were able to find the building even though they had never been there before. That night marked the beginning of Paul's underground life and was the beginning of an even greater set of challenges and evils. Many Jews took to a very dangerous underground life throughout Europe. The Nazis were moving throughout the continent towards their goal of killing all the Jews and taking over the world. Throughout the rest of the war, Paul, Jacob, and Fanny lived their underground life. They illegally removed their yellow Jewish stars that they had been required to wear and pretended to be non-Jewish Germans who had been displaced due to the frequent bombing. The family did not stay together throughout the rest of the war, but hid in various locations, such as train stations like this one. One event that left an impact on my grandpa was during his hiding in an apartment in Berlin with other Jews. He was the only member of his family in the apartment at the time, and the Gestapo had arrived to round everyone up. Thinking fast, Paul went into the bathroom and noticed a metal tub high on a ledge. He quickly climbed up to it and hid underneath it. Paul remained hidden until he was sure the building was empty. He then proceeded to climb down and found the door sealed, as the Gestapo did after leaving a building vacant. If it had not been for Paul's quick thinking, he would have been arrested along with the rest of the Jews. For the rest of the war, my grandpa stayed with the Lobel family. First, they hid in an apartment in Karlsruhe owned by a non-Jewish family. With time, the Lobels became suspicious of that family's actions, and they were fearful that they would be turned over to the Gestapo. So they next moved into an apartment owned by Otto Herner and his family. My grandpa Paul described Otto as a non-Jewish angel. Otto Herner owned an acre of land with a small barn located on the property. Due to the land's remote location, Paul and the Lobel family next moved to this barn where they would remain until they were liberated by the American soldiers. Paul's brother Jacob and mother were hiding separately in another town. When his mother learned that Paul had moved, she arranged for Jacob to join him. The conditions were terrible. Paul, Jacob, and the other Jews lived with freezing temperatures in an uninsulated barn that they shared with a variety of rodents. By this time, my grandfather was 13. Since he was the smallest and least suspicious, he had to fetch the food, a dangerous task. This picture was taken after the war in Germany and is of the barn that Paul, along with the other Jews, lived in. After 7 long years living with the fear and the unknown of whether there would be a tomorrow, my grandpa Paul and his family were liberated and reunited. His mother was hiding in a U.S.-occupied zone and was liberated first. She then went with a rabbi and 2 other Jewish soldiers on a jeep in search of her sons. In time, the rabbi and the 2 soldiers found Paul and Jacob in the barn in Edlingen. The 3 remaining members of the family were reunited at last, yet so much of who they were had been destroyed. This is Rabbi Hazelkorn, the U.S. chaplain who took the 2 other soldiers to find Paul and Jacob. This is a picture taken after the family was together and now free. Even though they were technically free, my grandfather's family, along with the surviving Jews, were left in a country that was uncomfortable and not home. In the picture, you can also see a dog. My grandpa was given this dog, whom he named Seppel, in order to give him something to care for and learn how to love again. He was given this dog by Captain Albert Hutler, a Jewish-American Army captain who would play a huge role in getting the family back on their feet. Together, the rabbi and Captain Hutler rented a small apartment for Paul's family where they began their new, free life. Captain Hutler became a father figure to Paul. Paul, now age 14, was once again living with the remainder of his family, only his mother and brother. Captain Hutler found my grandpa Paul a job working for the American Red Cross in Germany. For his job, Paul filled 30-gallon barrels with scalding hot coffee that he brewed. Looking back, he realized that this task was actually very dangerous. The next step for my grandpa and his family was to leave Germany and begin their new American life. Captain Hutler helped with arranging the proper paperwork and money that was required for the family to make it to the United States. By September 1946, everything had been arranged for the family's journey. That month, a military ship, the Marine Marlin, left Germany with Paul and his family aboard. It was a 10-day journey, and Paul was seasick the entire time. Hammocks served as beds for those aboard the ship. In time, the ship passed the Statue of Liberty, which for Paul represented freedom and pride. He and his family came to the port of Ellis Island. After 8 years of no schooling in Germany, Paul was able to begin his education in his new temporary home of Chicago. Schooling was not easy as he did not speak English and found himself very far behind academically. Later, Paul moved to San Diego with Captain Hutler and his family. A year later, Paul's mother and brother also moved to San Diego, and the Schauder family was reunited. My grandpa attended and graduated from San Diego High School in 1956. He continues his education at San Diego State University, where he earned a degree in accounting in 1960. During Paul's college years, he worked in a Jewish bakery at night in downtown San Diego to earn money for his family. Paul then worked with his mother Fanny to start a chicken farm, and together they sold eggs. Paul would later work this farm with his wife and children for many years. Even later, Paul opened a liquor store with his family. Paul proposed to Joan, who was his wife of 56 years, in the home of Max and Rose Schindler, who were also Holocaust survivors of Auschwitz. In 1962, Paul and Joan were married in San Diego. One of the rabbis who married them was Rabbi Hazelkorn, the very man who helped to reunite Paul and Jacob with their mother Fanny years before in Germany. Paul's best man was Captain Albert Hutler, who continued to be an important figure in Paul's life. Paul and Joan had 3 adult children together: Margot, Mark, my father, named for Paul's father Marcus, and Yael, and they became proud grandparents as well. Sadly, my grandpa recently passed away on January 19th, 2019, at the age of 87 after a brave battle with cancer. To sum up, this strong, humble man that I've shared about today was my grandpa, and his story helped to shape the person that I am today. If there's anything I hope I accomplished, it would be for each and every one of you to be more aware and embrace each other's differences. Don't just sit in the back and let someone tell you something that you don't believe is right. Stick up for each other and the right thing. I want to share a well-known quote by Martin Niemöller, a pastor who spoke out against the Nazis during the Holocaust. I find this to be very powerful and still relevant today. It reads, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." I turn to you as a superintendent and board members of the Poway Unified School District to help me share this important message to every student. I invite you to get in contact with me so we can work to make change in our community and create a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Talia, I just want to say I couldn't be more proud of you. I know I said that in front of 4,000 people, but I want to first thank you for coming here and sharing your presentation with us. I appreciate and applaud your leadership and your courage to go and speak this to all the kids throughout Poway and throughout the county. I get teary-eyed because I'm watching your grandmother behind you. I'm assuming that's your grandmother. You get teary-eyed, and your parents are so proud, and you can tell, and they should be. Because it takes a very special person to come out and share their story and speak on behalf of what's right, and I appreciate that, and I just want you to know how proud I am that you are a student here in Poway Unified.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That brings us to agenda item 4.4. It's a presentation Subject discuss the potential preparation for a request for proposals RFP to dispose of surplus real properties 312-293-11-00, 306-250-27-00, 306-020-32-00, known as the Black Mountain Ranch Southern Site. Mr. Little.
Yes. Thank you, President Patel. This evening we have Mr. Andreas Schaltes and Mr. Barry Blade with us, who will provide the board with information related to the use of the RFP process to facilitate the disposition of the district's surplus property located at Camino del Sur and Carmel Valley Road, which you just referenced. They will also present some examples of recent K-12 RFPs, as well as discuss next steps. So I'll turn it over to the gentleman.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Andreas, try and follow Talia.
I was just do my introduction.
Sorry, you
real
had to
quick
follow that one, right?
And say that very thing. I was going to say hello and just say, wow, that is a strong and poised young woman. So tough act to follow. Not even going to try. I'm going to talk about something entirely different, which is your property. So with that, Madam President and members of the board, administration, and Dr. Kim Phelps, we have a piece of property before you that you, of course, know of. You've had for quite some time, and it may be very well timed that you do something with that by way of disposition. We're talking here about the potential lease or sale or exchange of your property. I'm joined here by Dr. Barry Blade, who's a consultant for school districts on the property front. He and I have worked with a number of districts over the years to sell, to lease, to exchange, et cetera, so we can walk you through that. This is truly the beginning of something. If you're going to go forward with this particular property, you would hear from me on multiple occasions, and you'll be getting a lot more information in the future. So this just kind of kicks it off and gives you a sense of why we would be following a request for proposal process as opposed to something different in the education code. Very quickly, just a summary of the property that you have. 27.22 acres, so larger than some, certainly. A lot of school districts look to elementary schools or other smaller parcels that they might have. You've got 27.2 acres of vacant land to do something with. It is in the north of the intersection of Carmel Valley Road and Camino del Sur, and it's mostly what we call AR1-1. This would allow, if you had a conditional use permit in place for churches, for educational uses, for child care facilities, and assisted living, if you will. Separate from that, you've got a little about half-acre parcel, which is zoned for residential. This was about 6,000 square foot lots. You could probably get about 5 or so homes on that particular parcel. Back up to the other one, the large portion that you have there, that's really 10-acre lots. So you can imagine how few homes you could fit on 10 acres. That's the current zoning. To do more than that conditional use permit that I mentioned, you'd have to go through a full-blown zone change, general plan amendment, which would require under Prop A a ballot measure, and we'll talk just a little bit about that, and certainly more as we continue into the months. This is just a quick picture here, looking northerly direction, get a sense of what the property looks like. We stole these right out of a document and figured we'd give you a little sense of what they look like for those that haven't seen it. There's 3 of them here, along the street side. Okay, so we have, if you recall back to, well, actually it's taking a step a little ways back, 2012, you had a advisory committee, which is a necessary step. Take a look at this particular property, declare it surplus, which essentially means that you don't have any educational purpose for it. Many years later, after not taking any formal action on that particular step, recently in June, you passed a quick board resolution, simple, basically moving the ball forward ever so slightly, just saying, hey, we're going to maybe go forward with a request for proposal scenario rather than a bid auction scenario. This is what we submitted to the State Board of Education to say, hey, we would like to waive what we call the surplus property procedures. Under the traditional education code process, you sell your property or lease your property at auction. You literally send out information, have people show up, run an auction, conduct that, declare out loud what the offers are, ask for oral bids, just like you would think of in an auction scenario. successful in the past for some districts, certainly. Very competitive, as you can imagine. But sometimes you leave a lot on the table. You're not able to negotiate. You essentially take the highest bid in those scenarios. The request for proposal process is different from that and allows us to kind of negotiate and have a little bit more of a give and take, if you will, with proposers. So we went ahead and submitted through this resolution process starting in June to the State Board of Ed and asked them for a waiver. We anticipate receiving that middle of September. Should be September 11th and 12th. It's a 2-day meeting. If we don't receive it, we'll likely get it in November. It's every 2 months that they convene. So they would kick it out one time potentially, and it would be November. Separate and apart from all of that, that's the sale and lease scenario. You can always exchange your property as well. That's taking your property and swapping it for a different property altogether with any private entity. You can do that. We like to follow a process that's similar to the sale and lease even when we're exchanging property. You don't have to. You can go out and choose whomever you'd like to exchange property with. But in order to garner that competition and really get a sense of who's out there and who might be interested in the property, we like to add exchange into the mix when that might be a possibility for a district, and run them concurrently. And that's when I want to talk with you a little bit about this RFP process we'll follow. Again, we've submitted the proposal. We're going to get, we submitted the request for the waiver. We're going to get that waiver. There's a couple things we can't waive. When we go in and we talk about the surplus property procedures, that's a whole bunch of sections in the Ed Code that we can waive. Literally doesn't apply, doesn't apply, doesn't apply. One thing is how you use the proceeds from the property that you have. That you can't change. And the Ed Code will provide rules and regulations on those issues. And then notices that we send out to agencies. If you go through a bid process, there's a whole lot of them. Through a waiver process, there's fewer, but you still have some to do. So that's basically a simple little task, and we'll get that done as we proceed. They will approve unless the State Board of Ed can show that there's going to be some sort of harm to pupils or costs and the like, and there won't be in a scenario like this. So you will get it. It's just a matter of time. Again, we talked about the timeline being about mid-September. This bottom one here is a little bit interesting. It's this unofficial requirements by the California Department of Ed. Their waiver office some time ago, it's been years now, basically said, hey, we want to impose upon you some rules, or some guidelines, if you will, when going through a request for proposal. Number one, that you actually do that you go through a request for proposal. You ask anyone interested to come forward with proposals. Number two, that you execute a deal within 60 days of us bringing a final deal to the board. So there's a clock associated with that. There's certainly more than 60 days where we can talk with you about what we've received. There'll be a period of time where we are essentially confirming what we read. When you get proposals back, it might just be 2 or 3 pages. And as you can imagine, on a property transaction, if it's a lease agreement with an option and later a ground lease, it's a stack of documents. Or a purchase and sale agreement is 30 pages as well. So we'll clarify what we see in those proposals, and we'll negotiate and talk for a little while. At some point, when we have proposals in, we've clarified them, we've negotiated with entities that are interested, we'll come to you with more and more guidance and more guidance that is from you, more and more of your druthers, and take into account final negotiations, present final proposals, and that starts a 60-day clock. So we'll have to do that. And then at the very bottom here, this is really, I think, the crux of the matter. We state for the record in open session why this is the most beneficial deal. And what I like about that is it really speaks to why we're doing this. Rather than just taking the high bid at an auction, you're going to do what's most beneficial for the district. There's plenty of examples where we have a really high number come in on, for example, a sale on a property. And we think, wow, such a great number. We would love to have that income, if you will. But the entity proposing it might have missed the mark with regard to what they plan, what they think they're going to use the property for. Maybe they have way too many units, too much density on the acreage, and we don't think a city or planning commission would allow for that. So you get into escrow, only later to fall out when they can't get the entitlement package they're seeking. Those are the types of things that in this instance we can look to and know as information comes in what might actually have sticking power in escrow and what might actually get you to the end result of closing a transaction. Sir, question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could clarify that once you narrow down the proposals to the top 1 or 2, there's a requirement that we approve one of them for sure?
Oh, I should have made that clear.
Okay.
No.
Okay,
If
great.
you're,
That's it.
Always smart. No, always a smart question. You are not bound to anything. At any point in the process, you can stop, should you choose to do so. It's a great question. Okay, so yeah, the recommendation certainly is that we follow this RFP, request for proposal, rather than the auction process. It's not the only way to do things, but I think it is, in this instance, the best way. The proposal that we send out, the RFP that we send out, will have background information and explain what the property is, our sense of it, how long we've had it, how we acquired it, get information back in the RFP responses about the developer or the proposer or the school or the entity, whoever it might be that's interested in the property, what they are, what's their financial wherewithal, what have they done elsewhere in terms of development, what they plan to use the property for, which is certainly important to kind of get a sense of how serious they are, how much they want to pay, what their timelines are, and even the election strategy. Here, if they're going to go through a change in the zoning and build more that than would otherwise be required without that change, they would go through a ballot measure under Prop A, and that would have to get on a ballot, and your constituents would have to vote on that. So we would seek information in that RFP back from these interested parties to see that they have that in their timeline and that they're willing to pay for that and move the ball forward across the board. This RFP will consider all things: lease, sale, and exchange. And frankly, if it's your druthers, we would also have it consider a portion of the property. So you can do a piece of that 20 plus acres if you wanted to. And maybe we're not thinking that now, but down the road when you get proposals, you might see one that you like that's just for a portion or some sort of mixed use, and who knows what we'll receive. It's always exciting times to see all that. So you'll get to pick and choose among them and pick the one that's best for you and just state for the record why it's best for the district. Again, we talked a little bit already about this slide. It is the standard process is that auction. This is kind of atypical, but it's no longer atypical. We've been doing this now for a number of years and a lot of successes throughout the state that it's becoming in good favor. And perhaps if you were to sell only, bid auction might be just fine. But when you're looking at exchange, and certainly when you're looking at a ground lease, it's really, really hard to compare deals, apples to apples. Imagine being in an auction and having more than one proposal, more than one bid, and you think, well, I see the numbers are different, but all these terms are different. Deposit structures and timelines, and how do you compare those? How do you value that? This RFP allows you to pick and choose among them, which I think is a real win. So, and it's going to give you a lot of flexibility. That's really the mantra for me in this process, is give you all the information we can, and then you hone in on that most beneficial use. A couple of quick examples for you here, one each, if you will. Under the ground lease example, this is a pretty recent, about a year back, proposal response that we received for Capistrano Unified School District. They had what they call the South Bus Yard. It's only 5.1 acres, so certainly quite smaller, more than less than a quarter of what you've got. They received 5 proposals for ground lease. Here we only were seeking ground leases. We weren't looking to sell it outright or anything like that. Among the 5, the highest was Toll Brothers Apartment Living. It's a luxury apartment entity, $1 billion+ company, multi-billion, really large, came in and said, we'd like to build a lot of units, essentially multiple stories, straight up, explain what that might look like, explain what the city may be interested in, and really came out of the gates with a high number. They stood out based on who they were, what they thought they would build, and really the value. They were wanting a 99-year lease, which is the maximum you can have under the law, 99 years. They're honing in on 425 market rate units. That can change. Some might go affordable. It could be a higher number. It could be a lower number. But that was the sense that they could build this, and they're going to go try to seek that from the city. Remains to be seen exactly how many units. But assuming that 425, they're offering $3.15 million in rent for the first year. So you can see just what a property that is coveted could really push. Different. It's a lot of units. Very few sites can allow for that many units. Here, they came in strong with a good deposit structure, and there's scheduled timelines when those dollars to the district become non-refundable. As you go in time, you get more and more money that is non-refundable to the party who's interested. So it weds them to the project, keeps them moving the ball forward, and if for any reason it doesn't go through to the end result and something isn't built and developed, at least your time was paid for, so you have dollars in the door. And we would seek to do something similar here, regardless of the sale, lease, or otherwise exchange. We'd like to see some dollars up front. We'll talk more about that in the months to come when we really hone in on requests for proposals. So this was a real big one, if you will. And it's about a year in. It's going to be a few more years, certainly 2, They're going to deal with coastal commission and environmental issues and all sorts of things, but they're really moving forward. They've already went non-refundable on $1 million, so they like what they see and they're moving forward. Another great example I like a lot, recently with Fountain Valley School District, they have in the past done some sales, some leases, and even an exchange. So more recently, they had another elementary school site that had been closed for years and years, had a small school leasing it for some time, and they defaulted, frankly, and they were out rental income, and it sat fallow waiting for somebody to, do something with the site. So we got the idea, like we're doing here, of really just having flexibility, and we went out for a request for proposal for all or a portion of the site, and let us know, people out there, what you're interested in. What would you like to see? We received 20 back on the purchase side, so 20 different proposals to acquire it through a sale scenario. One ground lease from an entity that was going to come build out apartments, essentially, and then 3 to lease it as is. These were a charter and private school that wanted to lease the structures as is, kind of like what the district had done before. So here, doing a request for proposal scenario rather than a bid auction, it can pick and choose and really see what's stuck. They took many months to go through first the sale side, then the lease side, and kind of talk with all the entities that were interested and really get a feel for who could sweeten the deal, if you will. Hey, we've got this deposit. Can you match that deposit? And this amount of the deposit becomes non-refundable. Are you willing to match that non-refundability of the deposit? And frankly, price. Ultimately, we had a really large range from $5 million to about $38.5 million during those 20 proposals that we reviewed. We negotiated on 11 of the 20, got the numbers up. The highest one moved by $6 million, so 20%, if you will. And we honed in on a $36.5 million deal. And the reason I like to highlight that and take a pause and talk about it for a minute is the reason it was most beneficial. It was $2 million, not quite, $1.5 million, $2 million off the pace of the actual high. But the highest ones in that 37, 38 million range had far more units, more than we thought that the city was probably going to allow on that side, had no open space, and was essentially struck with a number of smaller concerns and issues like the delay of closing and all sorts of silly little deal points that when they add up, it kind of bugs you. Okay? Whereas the $36.5 million deal, we worked to get that number to where it was at $36.5 million. We got a competitor to be at $36.5 million as well. So now you've got backup and somebody right there in the wings to do that transaction if anyone else falls out of escrow. In this particular instance, it was a sale. And we got the deposit structure up all the way to $3.5 million 90 days out. So that's a chunk of money, including some money up front, immediate money up front. So we were able to, in open session, say, given the deposit structure, given the fact that some of it's going to be non-refundable, a ton of it, 10%, will be non-refundable right after a short due diligence period, and the fact that this is a fair amount of units because it can support a big number like that, 36.5. It was far fewer than the one, just a couple million more, and they were dedicating a full 1 acre park. So it really had legs, okay, and the community could support something like that very easily. So that was the reason we chose that, but for the RFP scenario, we wouldn't have that. They would have come in around 31 or 30, and we would have had to pick and choose among those just like that and not negotiate. So that is a great example to point to as well. And then the last one with an exchange. This has been a little while now. We like this one because they had a couple of different elementary school sites. There's a lot of bells and whistles to this deal. One was the full elementary. The other one was most of an elementary, but we dedicated some of the land for a less expensive price to the city to build out a bit of a park area. Ultimately, Cypress School District did dispose of the 2 properties that they had in exchange for 2 apartment complexes. I'll get to that in just a quick slide. The exchange agreement, this is interesting, the exchange agreement allows for some extra time. You can always exchange, in 60 days or 90 days, property for property. If you do that, you're going to end up with the value of your property as it sits now, 90 days from now, just quick. However, if you're selling or exchanging or anything and you're giving time, you're giving a period of time, an option for somebody to understand what they're going to be able to build because they've gotten through the city and ballot measure. If somebody buys it, if somebody's exchanging it, regardless of that method, that amount of time allows the entity who's going to receive your property to know what they can do with it, what their proposed use is. So rather than the appraised value or financial numbers that we're looking at when you first see these proposals cash on the barrelhead, you're going to have almost double that, or around double that probably, if you wait a couple years to allow for all this to occur. Okay? And I think you'll see that. I think you'll probably receive a proposal that says, hey, we'll give you option A, X amount of dollars, 90 days out. But option B, we're going to give you 2 times X amount of dollars, 2 years out. That's the kind of thing you might see when we receive these proposals back. So in this instance, we had an exchange agreement where we allowed for time. We allowed for the finding of a purchase, the finding the location of an extra property that would be changed with us, and even allowed for that to occur way, way, way at the tail end of the close of escrow. So gave the time necessary for the developer to get their ducks in a row. With the Cypress transaction, they've got 2 different properties, Coast Apartments and Azure Apartments. Both of these are in cities outside of the district, but still within their portfolio. You see they're getting about $440,000 worth of income. That's actually dropped in the last couple of years. They've got some additional expenses and I think a little bit less capacity. They need to rent out a few. The number will go back up, but I just wanted to give you current numbers. So they're pleased to be receiving this money for sites that weren't being used. They were just sitting there. So a couple of slides here and then I will conclude. These are the next steps. First one is the approval from the California Department of Ed. Again, we hope to have that. September 12th is the second of 2-day meeting. We should have it by then. If for any reason we don't have it, it'll be kicked out to November, and we'll push all of this conversation that you see here on that slide out a couple months. We would then release this request for proposal out to the public. We could do that as soon as your September 12th board meeting. We would meet again with the board, talk about what's in the request for proposal, the information, and really guidelines and saying this is what the district's seeking. Please come forward with what you've got. So that could be middle of September when we get that out the door. We want to give a fair amount of time for people to be comfortable, not with just the property, but the process that they would follow, the players that would be involved in that politically, and get their head around it. We think we know some of the entities that would be interested in a property of this size, but there's always some unknowns, and that's great. We don't want to dissuade anybody or rush anybody. I'm happy, I would be thrilled if we can come back with multiples like we did in some of those examples and talk with you and compare them. So we're shooting for December to come back with you and really give you a sense of not only what we received, but which ones you want us to focus on. You could tell us if, say, we receive 15, these are the 3 or 4 that really you need to spend your time with, not so much the others. And we would go from there. So we'll provide rank, be it sale, lease, exchange, give you a little spreadsheet, give you a sense of how they differ and what negotiation strategies might occur. Some of that can be done in closed session, where we're talking about price and terms of payment. And in fact, I'll implore you to do some of that in closed when we're dealing with talking with the various entities that are interested in moving their numbers around. It's perfectly legitimate and good business and savvy all the way around. So we'll help you through that should you want that information. And then, of course, lastly, we'll present to you what is final. That can take a little time, but hopefully by January, we'll know what we're looking at. If it's too close to call, we won't rush it. We'll come back in January and explain to you, these are the 2 that we really like, and what would you like us to do? But hopefully we'll be able to have one stand out that's really the best price, considering all other factors, use, timelines, and the like. We'll bring that back to you about then. 2 more slides. One little caveat, we will put in the request for proposal itself, this information. There is a right of first refusal for the residential developers that own the property before you. You acquired the property in the very late 90s, 97, 98, and in there it says that if you're going to not use it for an educational facility and do something else with it, these entities have the right to look at what you're offering, what you're going to accept from the proposer who we're dedicating as the high or identifying as the high. They get 30 days to look at that and say, yes, we'll take that deal. So it's just a right of first refusal. In the event that they say no, then you can go forward and cut the deal with the entity that you're seeking. There's some bells and whistles to that, too much information, but we'll work through that. Just wanted you to be aware of that and build that into a timeline. And then the last concern is just to make sure everyone understands it does still take time. Unless you wanted to do the sort of cash on the barrelhead or simple exchange and 90 days out and have a property that you acquire in exchange, for example, that's half the value that you'd get if you wait a couple of years. I assume likely we're going to wait a couple of years. So you're going to have a long escrow period. It is going to be described in whatever agreement you have. If it's an option and lease agreement or a purchase agreement or an exchange agreement, it'll spell out all of the milestones, what monies will come your way during that period of time. But that escrow period then allows the developer to talk with the Planning Commission and the city, do environmental review, and importantly here, like we mentioned, deal with Prop A and do the ballot measure. Okay, that would be November of 2020 perhaps. So we've got time built into this, so all of those come to fruition. In the event that the developer wasn't successful in getting what the developer needs to get in order to justify the price they would be paying you, the transaction wouldn't go forward as is. It would be modified in some way, or they would fall out, and you would have your deposits and either back to the drawing board, pick the next in line, who knows. We have a lot of success stories where right out of the gates in the first transaction it closes a couple years later, it's a win. We have others where we revisit and go to the second in line. A couple others where we said, well, we tried the bid auction and now we're doing the RFP. Here, given what we think we see in the climate in terms of the market and where that might be headed in 2020 and 2021, we jump through a lot of that, not waste time with that bid, and get right to it through this RFP. So that is really the crux of why the recommendation and why I think we're in a good place to move forward, even as early as mid-September, assuming the state board gives us the green light. Okay. Any questions of me or Dr. Blade even?
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the board? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
That brings us to agenda item 5.0, our consent calendar. The items listed under consent agenda are considered routine and will be approved or adopted by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. However, any item may be removed from the consent calendar upon the request of any member of the board, discussed, and acted upon separately. The superintendent and staff recommend approval of all consent calendar items. And I'll start from the end. Are there any items to pull? PJ?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, 5.3F.
Any items? Any items? All right. So excluding item 5.3F, is there a motion to approve the rest of the consent calendar?
Motion to approve.
Second. On a motion by Mr. Zane, second by Ms. O'Connor-Ratcliffe. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 4-0. So we will go to item 5.3F. Let me find that page. Sorry. Here we go. Approval of resolution number 0202-2020 entitled Authorization to Purchase Modular Buildings for the 2019-2020 school year using the same terms and conditions as the contract awarded to Silver Creek Industries, Inc. by the Chula Vista Elementary School District. Mr. Little.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Patel. The board may recall that this past spring, we brought to them a plan to move 4 portables from RB High School to 2 of our other schools to maximize student capacity at Del Norte High School and Bernardo Heights. Turned out one of those portables was not movable, and Del Norte's need was greater than we had anticipated. So we ended up moving 3 to Del Norte, and we need to purchase 2 that we were planning to move to Bernardo Heights, for Bernardo Heights. So this is asking for the board's approval to piggyback on a contract that Chula Vista had done for said purchase of portables.
Mr. Zane, since you pulled this item.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Little. So more just of a clarifying question. I know there was a member of the public who also had some interest in this item. And some of the public may not have the benefit of the revised green sheet that was provided to the board, which provides some clarification on the fiscal impact, which was originally detailed as approximately $350,000 from community facility district funds. You and I had talked briefly earlier as there's to clarify on that and what that really means. It's not exactly CFD funds. There's a little bit more to that.
Correct. That's true. Thank you. And thank you for the recognition of the revised green sheet. So I'm going to actually ask our Assistant Director of Planning, to come speak to the change, Ms. Rhea Oshbach. Sorry, Oshbach. I
It's a
practiced that all
difficult one.
afternoon. I didn't get it right.
That's okay. It's Oshbach, just in case. Thank you. Yes, just to clarify, the funds that we're using are CFD improvement area surplus special tax funds. Our CFD improvement areas allow for supplemental school facilities, and we can use the surplus special taxes as described in the mitigation agreement and the resolution of formation. And so instead of, using an abbreviated term for CFD funds, we changed it to show exactly what it stands for.
Because there's a specific difference between
There's a
CFD
specific
we have
difference. So the
improvement area
CFD
funds.
improvement areas are set up for city improvements. But with that, we worked with the city to determine that there was a piece of that funding that should be able to use for the district. It's our benefit for helping them sell bonds. So there's a little slice of the bonds that are left over, the surplus after all the debt is paid, that goes to the district and can be used for facilities that the district needs, and the district being PUSD, not specifically the CFD.
Appreciate the clarification.
I also have a question on this one. I was going to pull it if Mr. Zane hadn't. The way I'm reading the authorization, the resolution, it's not authorizing the purchase of these 2 classrooms at all. So there's really no fiscal impact in voting to approve the resolution. Am I reading that incorrectly? Because the resolution says nothing about the actual purchase of 2 portables. It just says we'd love to piggyback off of Chula Vista Elementary School District's contract terms.
I'm just looking at the now it be resolved that the board finds it to be in the best interest of Poway Unified to purchase modular buildings utilizing the above-mentioned contract. So
It doesn't authorize specific number of portables. It doesn't say for what site. So is that going to come back to us again as a separate item?
So we brought before an item for the architect, and at that time, it spoke to the fact that it was for Del Norte and for Bernardo Heights. And I think at that time, we had the same question about the use of funds in these particular funds. So yes, the resolution is specifically for, and either Janae or Chad can speak to it, specifically to use the piggyback, because we're in a space where this developer of the reloads needs to get us in line to start building those reloads. And so that's why we want to bring it forward, and we also always like to try to include what the fiscal impact and what funds will be used, whether it's something that we're approving, but generally we do bring something back once we get a little closer, and once we get not an architect, but a contractor that's going to put that project in place, the same as we did with Del Norte.
Well, that makes sense to me, but based on approval, if we approve this resolution, that doesn't mean that we can't use the same contract terms to buy additional portables for other sites, does it?
It does not mean that. I mean,
That's not
it
how
doesn't
I'm reading
preclude us
this.
from doing that.
Okay.
So the green sheet, we're asking for approval for the 2 portables, and that's the fiscal implication that's on the green sheet. And the resolution is allowing us to use the Chula Vista contract to procure that purchase.
So it's like a twofer.
That's right.
A little bit.
That's a great question, Michelle.
The recommendation doesn't specify Bernardo Heights Middle School 2 for that site. I'm uncomfortable that it's not clear there. I see it on the green sheet, but it's not in the resolution. It's nowhere in that resolution. I feel like if we're voting for the resolution only, we might need to have 2 votes on this, or state the recommendation differently.
Would you like to modify the motion?
No, I don't want to. I would like staff to help modify that in the way that you're actually going to recommend it. Because
Yeah,
right
just
now...
Can you approve it with amended language to the resolution?
Absolutely, yes. What would that look like?
Whereas we are going to purchase 2 portables for Bernardo Heights Middle School.
Okay.
It can be as short as that.
So at that point, it would be limited to just those 2 for Bernardo Heights, though, and
That's
no
correct.
additional ones if we find we need it at a later date. It
That's-
would come back to us.
If we did that, that would be correct.
Thank you.
So my understanding is the whereas would come just before the now therefore let it be resolved.
That's correct.
Okay.
Move for approval with the addition of that additional whereas.
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second now. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Thank you.
TJ. The motion was made by TJ, the second was by O'Connor Ratcliffe. And that is all for the consent calendar, and that brings us to item 6.0, personnel support services. First item is 6.1, maintain the district's current carriers, Aetna, Kaiser, Dental, and Vision for 2019 coverage. Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, President Patel. Staff would like to inform the board of our recent work with our insurance committee members. We had an opportunity to review the renewal rates that were provided by our current carriers, Aetna, Kaiser, our plan under Dental and Vision for the upcoming plan year. The good news is that the renewal premiums were competitive and just slightly less than what we're seeing in industry trend renewals for this upcoming year, and that's based on our current standard of claim expenses in this past plan year, which were somewhat of a decrease, and so that positively impacted our renewal rates from our current carriers. For example, Aetna's renewals increases just 5.5% over the current year's premium, which is just slightly less than trend renewals in what we're seeing with other organizations that they're insuring. The Kaiser renewals were no increase. The self-funded drug plan, based on the actuarial analysis, this program will have no increase in cost for the upcoming plan year. In our dental, the recommendation is based on the analysis of this year's claims. We recommended that we are confident in setting this year's funding at 95%, which would be sufficient to cover our costs for the upcoming plan year. So as a result, our overall expected increases, although an increase in premiums for the upcoming year, will be a reduction than what we had seen last year overall for our increases, and they are competitive and slightly less than what we're seeing for industry trend renewals. So therefore, the recommendation to staff from this committee was to maintain our current carriers of Aetna, as well as our plan for the drug plan and Vision as well.
Thank you. This is an information item. Are there any questions from the board?
Just a quick question, Ms. Jimenez. Is the insurance committee actually taking a look at other insurance options? We may have discussed informally previously VIBA as an option for the district. Is that something that the insurance committee is taking a look at, or to what extent does that involve the bargaining unit's participation in that?
So the insurance committee, in working with our broker, considered, based on the renewals, whether we would need to go to market, and looking at other carriers such as VIBA. Our renewals this upcoming plan year were so competitive that the recommendation was to maintain. But each year that we reconvene, which will begin again in the spring, based on what we're anticipating through the information we receive from our brokers, we will definitely consider going to market if that makes sense. The good news this year is that our renewals were very competitive, more than what we had expected.
Thank you. Item 6.2. Oh, we have a speaker on item 6.2, which is approval of title change and salary reallocation for Chief Communications Officer. Ms. Couvret.
David Little?
So after James presents, likely I will not need to talk.
Usually we take speakers before the item. Oh. Then James, Mr. Jimenez, would you like to introduce the item, and then maybe we'll take the speaker?
Yes. Okay. Item 6.2 is an approval of a title change and salary reallocation for Chief Communications Officer. The district's increased focus on communication and engagement with the community has significantly increased the importance and role and responsibilities of our Director of Communications and Community Engagement. The Personnel Commission completed a review of our classification and updated the depth and scope of responsibilities in coordinating and implementing our communications program, our public relations, and key support of our district initiatives in Poway Unified and what we experience in a district our size. The proposed salary range increase provides a competitive range that's similar positions in comparable large district and agencies throughout the area, and as management determines, which we would believe is a position that is difficult to recruit for and to fill. The Personnel Commission reviewed the updated changes to the job description at its August 5th meeting and approved the recommended salary range. Under the purview, based on Ed Code, the Commission's purview is to neither object to or support a range increase, but rather that the approval of that proposed salary range does not disrupt the internal alignment of within the communications job family and the positions that exist within that job family. Therefore, the board is asked to approve the Chief Communications Officer classification and that it be reallocated to range 24 of our current management personnel salary schedule.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board at this time? Did you wish to speak?
Sure. Well, just what the Personnel Commission did was we agreed that it would not affect internal alignment, salary alignment. What we didn't reach a conclusion on whether or not we support or don't support the actual increase from range 18 to 24. We did not take a position on that, either for or against. That's all. Thanks.
Are there any questions, or is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve, and I'll just say it's largely prefaced by the fact it's something from my experience in public affairs, public relations, campaigns over 20 years, and read in the details. It's something I fully support, and I think it's entirely worthwhile.
I'll second that motion.
On a motion by Mr. Zane, second by Ms. O'Connor Ratcliffe. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Item 7.1, approval of the 2019-2020 Poway Unified School District revised budget. Mr. Little.
Yes, thank you, President Patel. As you know, the board adopted the district's 2019-2020 budget at its June 27th board meeting, and that same day, Governor Newsom had signed the new State Budget Act. So pursuant to Ed Code Section 42127H, staff provides a revised budget for the fiscal year 1920 for the board's consideration and approval within the 45-day window as stipulated. At this point, Director Joy Ramiro is going to briefly walk us through the highlights of the adjustments that we made to the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Good evening. Tonight we are presenting the district's revised budget with revisions in revenues and expenditures based on the 2019-2020 enacted state budget. I would draw your attention to page 3 of 9 in the attached budget document entitled 2019-20 Assumptions. So this page will have all the revisions made in the budget. Under revenue, you will see an increase of $2.8 million under the restricted column. This will include the additional increase in special ed preschool grant by $1,446,000. The projected special ed AB 602 funding was adjusted by additional $159,000. A total of $1.6 million increase in special ed funding, which is the same amount, was reduced to the contribution to special ed program. We also recognize the new CTE Strong Workforce Program of $1.2 million in the budget. As far as revenues, I will just highlight the change in STIRS and PERS rates. Please refer to page 1 of the budget document. It will have the new rates for STIRS and PERS. So from 16.7 to 17.10% for STIRS, and for PERS, it was 20.733 and it went down to 19.721%. Although the increase in STIRS is only 0.4 versus the decrease in PERS of over 1%, the net impact to our budget is still an increase of $200,000 because, of course, the salary subject to STIRS is much higher. Also, we added budget for textbooks, which was in our reserve, $1.8 million. So between revenues and expenditures, it is a net decrease in the district's projected ending balance of $572,500. So on page 1 of the budget document, you will see the updated reserve level of the district. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board at this time?
Not a question, just a comment, though I'm not happy to see that reserve amount drop to 9.9%, where we had set it at 10 as our solid ground. I am mollified a bit to see that that's going to textbook adoptions, and that is directly for our students. So I'm happy to see that, at least, if we have to drop below it by that little bit because of some sad decisions about STRS. I'm glad it's for our kids. Yeah.
Is there a motion?
I motion to approve.
Second.
On a motion by Ms. Akins and second, is it Akins or Akins? On a motion by Ms. Akins, a second by O'Connor Ratcliffe. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Oh, wow. That brings us to agenda item 12.0, reports and comments. First, we'll do board member reports, item 12.1, and we'll start at the end. Ms. Akins.
First and foremost, I want to address how honored I am to serve on the PUSC Board of Education for the first time tonight to my fellow board members, as well as those of you left in the audience. Moreover, my work representing the thousands of students within the district started earlier than tonight. This summer, I was able to connect with some board members in order to kick off this school year on a good note and introduce myself personally outside of simply being their new colleague. Additionally, I was able to share a few ideas on how to improve our schools and the student experience within the Poway Unified School District. On August 1st, I was able to join numerous PUSD staff, teachers, SSAC members, and administrators at the Poway Palomar Middle College Retreat, where we took part in creating the outline of what middle college would look like integrated with our 6 high schools. I also met with 5 of our high schools' ASB presidents, executives, and the fresh faces of their high school leadership programs at the ASB Day-Long Retreat. There, I helped educate other leaders on ways to improve campus culture and promote long-term motivation for high school students so they can feel accepted, included, and recognized as they work hard in order to continue on to college. Nevertheless, my fellow RBHS leaders and I also learned an idea or two we might incorporate on our own campus. On top of meeting ASB leaders, I was able to meet with other FACE ambassadors our high schools hand-selected to express the extraordinaire that Del Norte, Mount Carmel, Westview, Poway, and RB had to offer. We strategized new ways to teach character counts to our elementary school students. All in all, I am elated to see how much we can accomplish for the students in the Poway Unified School District during my term serving on the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Zane?
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, thank you and welcome, Ms. Akins. It's been a pleasure just getting to know you recently, and I look forward to working with you this year. And I also think she might have set, it's the first time I've seen where we actually moved on a motion made by the student board rep. So I don't think you recognized at the time, but she made like a little bit of history here in her very first meeting. It took me by surprise. Like, wait a minute, wow, she just made a motion for approval. That's awesome. I don't have a formal report, and so just on a little bit more of a somber note, I really appreciate the inclusion of the Talia's tolerance presentation, particularly in the wake of the acts of evil this past weekend. There's so much more I can say. I could feel myself getting choked up about it already. I think it's important that we highlight the sins of humanity as often as possible so we don't repeat them. I often tell people I spent some time in D.C., and if you ever get to D.C., the best place you can ever go is the Holocaust Museum. It's unbelievable. I encourage people to go there and never forget. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Coubret?
So So I can't believe you didn't mention the 4th of July parade and our Super Soakers. So, yeah. So that was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed riding on the fire engine with their mom, and it was a lot of fun. And then we went to the Rancho Bernardo High School fireworks, and just it was a great sense of community celebrating America. So that was wonderful. I do want to go back and touch on Talia a little bit. I was fortunate to live 6 years in Germany, and of course went to Dachau and was able to take my kids back there a couple years ago. And in a way, we go, gosh, we're losing all these people who are firsthand witnesses. But then you look back saying it was only 80 years ago that something so horrific happened. So I love that our students are taking the time to really reach out, because our kids will learn a lot more from Talia than they will from our folks lecturing to them. So just so impressed that she's taken this on herself to do that. During this break, I hope some people were rejuvenated. I was able to spend some time with community members and really asked a lot of questions just to better understand their perceptions of PUSD and hear their ideas and concerns. And it was really enlightening, and I look forward to sharing those ideas as we move forward on some things. This past Monday and Tuesday, the leadership conference was absolutely amazing. You guys put on such an incredible program, and that brought together the leaders of our district to learn from each other. And this intelligent, hardworking group just has a passion of putting our students first and finding ways to coach teachers and staff just to be the best individual learner possible. And I just really appreciate you guys taking the time, and I love the interaction of our leaders. My curiosity brought me to attend the Personnel Commission, where I really appreciated the warm reception and patient answers to my many questions, because that was one area I had not investigated, so I appreciate that. And then I know all of us attended the adult school graduation last night, which was just phenomenal and inspiring, because each of these graduates had their own unique journey and truly overcame obstacles to achieve the goal that they chose for themselves. And it was just a really special way as we start the next year. So on to you guys.
Thank you. Ms. O'Connor-Ratcliffe?
I really appreciate you, Dr. Phelps, bringing Talia here to present to all of us. I was invited by the principal at Mesa Verde to attend when she presented to them, but I couldn't make it that day. So I'm really grateful that you brought her here for us, even though I didn't have enough tissues handy. That was really moving. I'm really looking forward to working with you, Ms. Akins, and I owe you a meeting. I'm excited about your energy and what we can do together at this session. The RB Spirit of the Fourth Parade, I thought we really had something started there, but we'll build. I had the pleasure of being at swim lessons at Mount Carmel High School with my son for 4 weeks this summer. That was wonderful. We have a lot of community kids at so many of our pools, and just judging by what was going on at Mount Carmel High School, we have a community of swimmers. Everybody is good in the pool. I love it. I also spent a lot of time with the employees there who really wanted to educate me on what our pool reorganization plan is going to look like and what it feels like to them now. So I think we've got a lot to watch for and make sure everything's going well going forward. 4 weeks of earfuls every 30 minutes that I'm sitting there with my kid. Just let me watch my kid. But it was a good experience. It was good to hear from community like that who's really directly impacted. The Leadership Institute was amazing, as always. I can't wait to read the book that I picked up at that. The energy there of our principals and assistant principals was just outrageously great. So thank you, Ms. Osborne. I know you put in a ton of work on that. I know there were a lot of other people, but you were the face of it. So I really appreciate your time there. The Oak Valley groundbreaking, I just want to note that the responses from the community on that, I think, reflect that we have a lot of educating to do for our community. A lot of people just don't understand the difference between CFD and Mello-Roos versus what the rest of the district, who doesn't pay those funds, what we can do for those schools right now versus what
can happen at a CFD Mello-Roos school. Those are very different pots of money, one that's empty and one that is restricted on what you can use it for, and it depends on which one you're in. There's a lot of educating that's going to have to go on because our community doesn't understand how that happens. Clearly, we need the extra space at Oak Valley, but we have a lot of work we need to do at other schools. So our community doesn't understand yet why Oak Valley gets it and other schools don't. So again, a lot of educating necessary, and I look forward to planning that community outreach on that. The summer graduation was fabulous. You already talked about it. I'm still not allowed to say school at my house. My kids are, no, we're not talking about that yet. Like, okay. But I am very excited for school to start soon. Can't wait. It's going to be a great year.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. It is officially the start of the 2019-2020 school year because many staff are already at work in their classrooms. And there really is so much going on already, including the construction at Oak Valleys. We have welcomed so many new staff to the district and staff moving around throughout the district into new positions. And I had a wonderful, long meeting with Ms. Akins, and I don't even know how the hours went by. I didn't realize it was hours. Our conversation was so in-depth and natural, and I'm excited. Sorry, you also had a lot of time, Ms. O'Connor Ratcliffe. You could just keep your hand motions to yourself. So we had a lovely conversation, and Ms. O'Connor Ratcliffe will have a chance to meet you at sometime, maybe when her kids are back in school. Fire engine. And realize how wonderful you really are, and we're really excited for you. And you showed your worth. You already made a motion. That's pretty impressive. And I attended several of the events that my colleagues have attended, so I am not going to include descriptions of that, and I will keep my report very brief. I am very excited about this year to come. There's a lot of challenging work ahead of us. We've got sophisticated things going on in the district, including a bond, possible properties exchange, but it's really all for the best purpose, and that is our children. Ultimately, it goes back to our children. I'm looking forward to attending the All-PUSD school kickoff with renowned educational speaker George Koros, and I'll close my report with a quote from him. Our jobs as educators and leaders is not to control others, but to bring out the best in them. And I was very inspired by that. Thank you. That's the close of my report. That brings us to item 12.2. Dr. Phelps.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to extend a warm welcome and congratulations to our new principal at Tierra Bonita Elementary School. We're so excited to have you to join our leadership team. Even during the summer, our students have been winning awards. Please look at the board packet for full descriptions in 12.2. In the interest of time, though, I'd like to highlight a couple. Mesa Verde Middle School's Kara Fan was selected as one of our top national finalists in the 3M Young Scientist Challenge. Her project on nanoparticles liquid bandage will move on to the final event held in October at 3M's World Headquarters in Minnesota. We also had numerous PUSD students and staff win National Youth Arts Awards for their amazing musical theater and theater performances from the 2018-2019 school year. August has been extremely busy so far. As we ramp up for the start of the school year, earlier this week we hosted a leadership academy for all of our principals and assistant principals. And last night was the Poway Adult School PUSD Summer School graduation. So congratulations to our graduates. Next week, we will hold our APSIM breakfast, our extended cabinet retreat for district directors, as well as our new teacher orientation. And on Friday, August 16th, we will kick off the new school year with thousands of our Team PUSD employees, all together with our keynote speaker, George Kuros, focusing on how we can inspire our students and how they, in turn, inspire us. I am so excited to kick off another school year, and our team has been working hard throughout the summer. Personnel has been extremely busy hiring nonstop since the spring to bring our best candidates to Team PUSD. Facilities and maintenance have been busy making sure our campuses are ready for our students and staff. ESS and preschool were in full swing over the summer. The special education department was running the extended school year. BSS has been making sure our budget is in order and programs and supplies are being funded. Tech and Innovation Department has been updating equipment and conducting trainings, and Abraxas Valley has already started their school year. I hope you join me in my excitement and most of all, my confidence that the 2019 and 2020 will be a fantastic school year. Working together, we can accomplish great things for our students. And finally, I hope most of you will be able to squeeze in some time off this summer. I had to actually cancel my annual vacation, which is my normal family houseboat trip, but for good reason. I had the opportunity to watch my daughter play in the Triple Crown World Series, and her team took the championship and won, and so they are the champion of the 12U World Series. And then just last week, they went to the Premier Girls Fast Pitch National Champion Tournament and made it all the way to the championship game, where my daughter had the opportunity to pitch in the semifinals in the championship game. Unfortunately, we did not win and we did not prevail, but they are second in the country in their age group, so I couldn't be more proud of them. Lastly, I want to just say to all of our staff and family, enjoy these last few weeks of summer. Before August 21st, we look forward to filling our schools with all of our children. Thank you, and this concludes my report.
Thank you very much. We are now at item 13.0. We do have to have a continuation of our closed session agenda from page 1. So although we are adjourning this meeting, we will continue into the next meeting. We are adjourned at, what time is it?
7:40, going up to open closed session.
7:40 and going up into closed session at 7:40. Thank you.